water, which has become both a good and a bad thing because we still had to remove the carpet, but at the same time, the glue stuck better in my room since it was not flooded like the rest of it, so now I've just got a shitload of glue residue on my floor.
That's horrible. And also probably sounds even weirder out of context. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Game Central Junction. As always, I'm your host, Metal, and Marsupial's not here today, so Buck is filling in. Say hi, Buck.
Hi, Buck.
Excellent. As always, please share us out with somebody else who might want to watch the show. Or not. You can strap them down, use some of the glue residue from Buck's room to keep them to a chair and force them to watch it. And if you really enjoy the show, consider donating to what I probably should have renamed from the Soda Fund to what is now the Headphones Fund at streamlabs.com/vomitoriumlive because my headphones are dying. Oh my God, they're being held together by electric tape right now. I only have sound in one ear. And
I haven't hit the sound issue, but I am also using electric tape to hold my headphones together.
You need to run out and buy a new pair. So, you can always help me out with that, too, and donate to the fund. And with that, we'll get on with the show. So, it's summer. And summer is kind of... actually, it's officially summer. For me, it's felt like it's been summer a lot longer. Because you remember how it is in Texas.
Yeah, I know. My mom keeps on bringing up what the temperature in Cedar Hill is, and I keep on going, glad I'm not there.
Yeah. It hasn't been so bad for me because I'm used to the heat, but it does give you that delusion that summer starts earlier than like somewhere between the 20th and 22nd, depending on the year, right? But we're in the 27th, so it is summer. It is actually summer now, and summer is a really good time for games. Previously, when we have ran the Vomitorium every single day of the main week, it was during the summer just because of how much news is released during that bit of time. So it's always an exciting time for Game Central Junction. It's probably going to be more exciting on this show for the next few months than it will be on the Monday show, but don't worry, we'll still find stuff to talk about. And one of the things that excited me, I think I'm just going to go knock this out so we can get past the subject, since I'm probably going to be the only one here on the show or even possibly watching it that's excited about it, is Nikke, Goddess of Victory, had their summer live stream. And you know how I'm kind of a gacha gamer. I mean, I play a lot of games. I've probably played more games than most people in general have played. But at this point in my life, I play a lot of gacha games, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so this one specifically is called Nikke, Goddess of Victory. It's been running for like a year and a half now, I think. I think they recently just had what they call their 1.5 anniversary. So it's a pretty new game overall. And it's a shooter game. It's more of a cover fire game, right? The game mostly plays itself. You can focus. In fact, some of the harder challenges, if you're not actually switching out your characters between cover itself and then focusing on where they're firing, you're just going to lose the challenge. But for most of the game, you just leave it auto and they play it. It's more of like a waifu collector than anything. Very, very hot babes. Some of them cartoonishly buxom. I don't see the appeal in those, but there's a lot of hot babes in there. And in the summer event, you can expect a lot of swimsuits, right? Like that's what you would normally expect from the those events. But they did have an announcement during their live stream that completely, pun intended, blew everything out of the water, right? And they've had a couple, I would say, cross-studio collabs with like different development studios already. And this time, they had a collab with Dave the Diver that's coming July 4th. Which I'm sure you've probably heard of Dave the Diver, right?
I mean, yeah, as you can expect, even if I didn't pay much attention to it, it had a Godzilla crossover, so that ended up popping up into my feed anyway.
Yeah, Good Night Spoon asked, did Marsupial quit because he thinks I'm someone else? No, he just couldn't be here today. But yeah, Godzilla crossover. I forgot about the Godzilla crossover. But yeah, so Dave the Diver is phenomenally popular indie game right now. And Nikke, which I should probably mention for people who don't know, is made by Shift Up. It is the game that they made prior to Stellar Blade. So this is the same company as Stellar Blade. Which, surprised they haven't done a Stellar Blade crossover yet. That might be coming later in the summer because they said there was going to be 2 summer events, and the second one they just left a question mark next to it. So I'm like, that's probably going to be in-house. Hopefully that's finally their in-house crossover. But they're doing one Dave the Diver, and I think the thing that made it so crazy wasn't that just that it is a crossover with the Dave the Diver team. When they showed the video, immediately you see the sprites, and it's basically the full Dave the Diver gameplay in this phone game. Like, it has the sushi bar with the same exact chef, right, cutting up the sushi. It's got all the cutscenes and everything. It's the sprites. And the big thing that's different is when you go diving, instead of Dave, right, you have 2 of the Nikke girls, Mast and Anchor, are the ones that you can go diving as instead. But the gameplay is exactly the same. They're just fitting Dave the Diver into Nikke for this event.
See, it would have been funnier if Dave himself became a possible drop.
It would be funnier if they made a hot woman version of Dave and still called her Dave, because that would kind of like be in line for these type of games.
I mean, yeah, probably.
It'd be like, do you remember, was it Fatal Cuties? And they dropped Terry in there, but it was like he woke up isekai'd as a girl or whatever in this version.
Yeah, I do remember that, and that was definitely a good one.
You know what's funnier is that people stopped paying attention to that game. I believe eventually Iori was dropped in there too. And instead of actually being like a full girl like Terry was, I think he was just like cross-dressed with the makeup and everything on, and it was hilarious. Have you ever watched a Horror Writer Plays? No, I have not. Yeah, but so I'm excited for this. The problem is all these gacha games are competing with each other, especially on a specific date. So they're dropping this on July 4th, which makes sense. Nikke, while being I believe South Korean is Shift Up, game, is a game with sexy girls and guns. So clearly one of their biggest target audiences is the United States. Right, girls and guns. It's our favorite stuff. July 4th makes sense for that. Also dropping on July 4th is Zenless Zone Zero, which I've told you quite a bit about before, and I've probably talked about a bit before this. There's actually going to be a live stream, I believe, or they're going to do it in stream form. The presentations are all basically the same as a premiere. They just run it through a stream so they can have it on all the different networks at once. But it's going to be a presentation that they run live like you would a news show or whatever. And they're going to talk about Zenless, get ready for the launch tomorrow. Probably early in the morning. I forget when it is. I could probably actually look up when it is by going to their YouTube channel. And Zenless drops on July 4th, which makes sense because they have said specifically with this game they are trying to target the American audience. And it's just too much stuff. It's too much stuff to keep up with at once. And Zenless is going to be an action game. A lot of people don't think this game is going to be popular. I don't think it's going to be as popular as Star Rail or Genshin, specifically. Just due to certain nature of it. I think it will be more popular with a completely different crowd. With some overlap than, say, Star Rail or Genshin are, right? Because even those, they scratch different itches. Genshin has that open world exploration itch. Star Rail has that turn-based combat itch that a lot of people like. This one is going to be your kind of like high stakes action combat, similar to Honkai Impact 3, but it's gonna be like that Devil May Cry style combat, right? but it's going to be more focused into like tighter arenas, more focused on just continuous end game, some roguelike elements in some of the modes and stuff like that. Even the storytelling is going to be tighter because it's going to be told in this kind of like comic form, right? Where this things pop up and there might be slight animation, but it's going to be an animated comic. Is how they're going to do all their storytelling with some fully animated scenes in there here and there. So I think that's going to be popular with a different crowd, especially given that the director or no, the producer in the Japanese side, because Zenless is being made mostly by their Japanese studio, is having a sit down with the producer and director of Street Fighter 6 to talk about things. We don't know if that means later down the road there's going to be a Street Fighter collab. Probably not. If there might be a collab with Capcom in general, also probably not, though obviously with the gameplay style, if they did any collab, I would want it to be a Devil May Cry one. But it's probably just going to be both of them talking to each other about like how they make their games, what they like from games and stuff. Like this nice little sit down stuff that like normies don't really care about, but gamers do, because every gamers actually like hearing from the devs. And basically, my separation between normies and gamers here is going to be a certain how many hours a week do you play video games, right? And I think if video games are like your main hobby, where when you're not working, when you're home or doing something, and you're spending, I don't know, I think even most of these surveys, when these companies survey you, they have the bottom line. To really be a gamer, you have to be playing more than 20 or more hours of gaming a week, right? And anything other than that, you're casual, you're probably a normie. That doesn't mean you don't like video games. You're just not as into gaming as a hobby as people who spend 20 or more hours a week gaming. So those people in that category tend to like hearing devs talk, and I think they're trying to market each other's games to each other. And if Zenless is going after the fighting game audience, that kind of lets you know a little bit about the mechanics when you're actually in combat. But they also have a lot of like almost party game stuff to it too. And apparently Digimon World was another big influence on Zenless. And I guess these little rabbit guys, these little robot rabbits kind of remind me of the eggs from it, so I could see that. I actually can't wait to see how that's going to affect it. But they actually don't have the stream scheduled. Zenless, what are you doing? You said that the stream is tomorrow, and you don't even have it scheduled on your channel. You guys are crazy. Oh well. I don't know when it's probably, if it's gonna be like the other ones, it's gonna be like 6 o'clock in the morning. Is gaming really a hobby? That depends on how you define hobby. It can be. Because I think to be a hobby, which technically the word hobby originally comes from the word house, so it has to be something you do at home, right? So it's clearly the distinction between work and home life. It's Hob. Hob means house in Old German. It's where hobgoblin comes from. The word hobby first was used with a hobby horse, right? So it's like a horse inside your house. That's the rocking horse. Could gaming be a hobby? I think if you're developing skills, if you're taking something seriously, yes, gaming can be a hobby. In fact, that's why I am actually delineating whether you spend 20 hours or more on it. But I do think it's your attitude towards it too. In the same way, like if you're just vegging out like you do watching TV, it's probably not a hobby. But I think TV watching can be a hobby too. If you get into discussion groups with other people, right? Like about shows. It's no different than a book club. And I find a book club is basically the hobby version of lit, like being a lit major or something, right? If you're actually talking to people about video games, if you're getting into in-depth discussion about different things, I think it could definitely be a hobby. In fact, I think you can probably tell when gaming is a hobby for someone versus when it's not, just by talking to them. And I think even for some people, gaming as a whole isn't even necessarily their hobby. Specific genres of gaming are their hobby, right? Like people who spend countless hours getting better at fighting games, but they never go to tournament. Once you get paid to do something, though, it's no longer a hobby. It's just work, right? Some people game for work, right? You have like people who live stream as their job, gaming, or obviously they're working in for gaming. People who compete in tournaments for stuff. Yes, with no intention of making a profit. That actually was the point that I'm basically getting to too. Is it's the delineation from home and work, right? If you remain amateur in something, you're treating it as a hobby, right? So you can be an elite golfer, but if you donate all of your winnings because you want to remain amateur, then technically you're a hobby golfer. You're just like some of the best hobby golfers in the world. If you're constantly winning the tournaments, that's really it. So yeah, gaming can definitely be a hobby. Yeah. Forgot where I was going with this. Something about Nikkei and Zenless. I don't know. I've just got too many games to play, which I guess sounds like a really awful problem to have. Right? Like you or a really good problem to have. I guess we'll put it that way. It depends on like how you phrase it, right? But it's like you could have worse problems in the world than having too many games to play, right? Like it's a pretty privileged problem to have, is having too many games.
Yeah, definitely. Just like, yeah, it's horrible. I have too many choices.
Good Night Spoon says he has no hobbies. I'm sorry for that. I have too many hobbies. That's another problem to have. I have too many things I'm interested in. The problem is, it's the mix. I've got too many things that I both want to and not want to make money off of, right? It's like all the stuff that I want to make money off of, I also want to do other things in it where I don't make money off of it. So I've got too many things I want to also be work and hobbies at the same time. It's awful. I don't know. I guess I kind of just want to be like one of those old philosophers back in like antiquity, where they just enjoy doing things, and they show up and people pay them for doing the thing they were going to do anyway. But even if they don't get paid, again, they just keep doing it. I think I just want to end up in that situation. It's like, why, thank you. I was going to do this anyway, but I will definitely take the tip. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that summer event. Wow, that only blew just about 20 minutes. Good thing I've got other things to talk about. So, something you might be able to participate a little bit more in. There was an interview with Hidetaka Miyazaki, who is the leader of From Software. And in this interview, he was basically establishing that their Sekiro was kind of like a turning point for the studio. And that's when they kind of made the decision for how they were going to treat Elden Ring. And Elden Ring, you're going to be able to basically tell the difference between the studio before and after Elden Ring. With Elden Ring being that starting point. So technically, I guess Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is the turning point there. But they're going to have a bigger focus on, yes, they're going to continue having like a Souls-like game going on. but a lot of them might end up looking more like Sekiro just because they were able to get that out a lot faster, and having the difference between the slower Souls-like and the faster Sekiro can give them wider audiences that they can shoot for. But with Armor Core going on, and Fires of Rubicon did very well, he wants to have a greater focus on them running multiple projects at the same time. And to me, that's really good news, because we were talking a little bit beforehand. I really like FromSoft. I've just kind of preferred almost all their other games to the Souls franchise.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I really liked Demon Souls, but that's because it's the one that took the longest to punish me for making a tank build.
Yeah. And Demon Souls
I'm sorry,
is kind of like
but
their
that's
most experimental game in that genre, being one of the earliest parts.
Yeah, you could try arguing it's the first Soulsborne game, but that's only if you count the games that weren't made by FromSoft.
Yeah.
Because there are other companies that did that shit first.
Yeah. But I think we do have to. That's why I hate that genre of Soulsborne, because I don't think it actually existed until recently, right? Like, until other companies recently tried to make games like the Souls games, right? Because it doesn't actually become a genre till there's multiple things in it. And Souls previously was just like a subgenre that existed in another one, and it was basically a Metroidvania. I would say they were 3D Metroidvanias that play like Ocarina of Time, more or less. Like that is just what the Souls games were, the older ones, and they've developed more into their own thing over time. But like if you go back to Demon Souls, the combat is basically just Ocarina of Time combat. And even people try to say, oh, we've got a 2D Souls game. Your 2D Souls game is just a harder Metroidvania game. That's all it is.
Yeah, pretty much. Like Salt and Sanctuary is a pretty good example of
Blasphemous
that.
is another good one too, along with Salt and Sanctuary.
Because, like, yes, a 2D Souls game, it's like, you could literally play a Metroid or Castlevania game, and it's almost the exact same shit.
Yeah, all they did was make the combat a little slower, but for the platform to be fun, they still have to have, like, an aerial dash or anything like that. But it's like, okay, we've got a dodge. Oh, later Castlevania games had dodges too, right? We've got these hard bosses. Okay, all you want to do is you want to make the punishment value the same as a Souls game. So you can level some, and leveling will make a difference, but some of the bosses might still one-shot you if you get hit by the wrong thing, right? Or at least bring you low enough that you have to potion up, and they want you to have, like, the potion mechanic. That's all it is. It's still just a Metroidvania game. You're just focusing on the mechanics that were specific to the Souls games. But now you could actually kind of almost call it a genre of its own. It has branched a little bit, but when you have things, what was that Pinocchio game? Liza P, I think was the name of it.
Yeah, that's it.
Where it's like almost one-to-one trying to be like Dark Souls. Like, okay, anything that fits in this now that we have other games, there's a couple other people who have tried to make things like that. Now, you've got multiple games that are in this, you can kind of call it a genre on its own. But one company making a game type does not make a genre, right? Like Legend of Zelda as a style was not really a genre until other people were trying to make games like Legend of Zelda. It was just a franchise at that point.
Yeah, because otherwise it was just, okay, we have Majora's Mask, we have Ocarina of Time, it's like, yeah, but until somebody else makes it, it's not a genre or a game type, it's just the exact same style of game.
Right? Because like even
Right,
Legend of
yeah.
Zelda didn't even have its franchise almost genre defined until the fourth game, I would say, right? Because you have the original, but then Zelda 2 changes things. Then you have Awakening, which kind of brings you back to the original, and then you have A Link to the Past, right? And then if we actually delete 2, we have a 3-game pattern now. So A Link to the Past is what kind of actually solidified the genre of Zelda. Because also at that time, while other people on the NES and the SNES, and I guess even the Game Boy, were making games like Zelda. In fact, actually, even over on PC, people were trying to make stuff. And I think we were talking about another franchise not too long ago by Crystal Dynamics, whose franchise is basically just them being in the Zelda genre up until that weird multiplayer game that they made, which is the Legacy of Kain. The Legacy of Kain is just the Zelda genre.
Yeah.
The first one is a top-down Zelda, where you have Blood Omen, and then when you get to Soul Reaver, it's a 3D Zelda. Like it's just the Zelda genre.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's like 2 and on is basically just Ocarina of Time style gameplay, just in gothic horror setting.
Yeah.
Actually, remember that Zelda-esque game that you could make your own like pixel character, 8-bit hero?
Yeah. I never
was
played it,
weird.
but I remember it. Yeah. But we even have what was it? There's like 2 Zelda-likes top-downs that came out recently. The one I can't remember the names of either of them. Marsupial was here; he would know at least one of them because I think he played it. But there's the one where you play as like the fox that's wearing a tunic. I think maybe the name was Tunic. It was just Tunic, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one because I have a friend who uses the 8-Fox as his profile pic, and as a joke, I just kept calling the game like his gamer tag instead of the game title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like that's what it takes to be a genre. Souls is a genre now. My problem is that they are trying to genre define their games too much. Like how they said Sekiro is a turning point, right? Oh, hey, Fizz Chozo. Fires of Rubicon. Well, it has a lot of the stuff the previous Armored Core games had, like the mechs period, but also like the building of the mech where you could change out parts and things like that. It's a much faster paced game, and basically they just took the framework that they used from Sekiro and put mechs in it. That's what it is. Still looks like a fun game. It's not exactly what I want from an Armored Core, but I watched a lot of gameplay. I would probably enjoy it for what it is. But it seems like that's the split they're doing. If they're going to do anything like that, I would actually want them to just make a sequel to Metal Wolf Chaos, to be honest. Because that would work with that Sekiro style of gameplay a lot more. Actually, if you go back to it, it kind of looks like the predecessor to Sekiro and the modern Armored Core. Did you see what I sent in the video games channel? I will go check on it, but how do you feel about Sekiro kind of currently dominating how they make their other games?
I don't really mind that much because Sekiro was a decently fun game, and it is a lot of what like the fans of those games are into. I'm not personally a fan, but again, I haven't really been much into the Souls games because I am a guy who likes tanky builds, and you have to bend over backwards to get them to work in that game.
Yeah. To be fair, we've talked about this before in the gaming definition of a tank. Tanks, when a game are balanced, don't necessarily work super well in 1v1 situations. They can. I'm not saying they can't, right? But overall, they usually don't. They're kind of meant for team play. And it is kind of sad that as they start adding multiplayer into these games, that they don't make tanks more viable, because they would be fun in co-op. Imagine they're doing your job, being like unkillable, like, ha ha ha, I don't have that much damage, but you can't kill me, and then your friend comes over and just stabs the guy in the back. That'd be fun.
Definitely.
I did look. It was something he had already sent. I thought he might have sent something new. I did look at Alcahest. I have no interest in it. If you do, good on you. But, yeah. Just so you know, Fizchozo. But, yeah. I think it would be cooler, even if they did a Sekiro-like game or something. Something that would even make tanks more fun to play. Because when tanks are fun in single player, they're less of the RPG or even like video game definition of what we call tanks, and we're just turning them into actual battlefield tanks, right? Where they are unkillable and have huge cannons, which can also be fun, but that's just like a different game. A game that I'm sure you'd be interested in. It's just a different game, right? That's like playing Hulk Ultimate Destruction, which I know is a game you liked.
Oh yeah, that was a great game. It's just too bad that Radical Entertainment is one of the companies that got, you know, what was it again? Activision.
Yeah. No interest in Alcahest? It's from the Arcane developers. I didn't really care that much about Arcane. I think we went over that when the studio was shut down. Like, I'm sorry for like most of their projects and the people who were interested, but it just wasn't something I cared about. I hope it's successful. I hope those devs bounced off their feet, but it's just it's not me. It's not for me. Good night, Spoon. Why so many people block me? Am I that offensive? You didn't like Dishonored? I mildly enjoyed the first one. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say I liked it. Those games weren't really for me. It's cool that you like them, though. They need an audience if they want to sell their games. That's the cool thing about there being so many different developers and genres of games. Everybody can get stuff they like. Oh, so Fizchozo claims that he didn't block Goodnight Spoon because I guess we did talk about this last time. He was trying to figure out how to unblock people. So I'm guessing he went into the block list and Goodnight Spoon wasn't there. So it must have been the other way around. Goodnight Spoon, you must have blocked him. The plot thickens. But follow along on our random episodes of the live stream for the drama between our chatters.
You know what just popped into my head when you said the plot thickens?
8-bit theater?
No, but that's one of the things that's always in there. No, just, you know how the writer for One Piece did the joke with Nami's boobs?
Yeah.
How funny it would be if nobody noticed with how long it's gone.
Well, the thing was, it was the time skip, right? So, like, it was very obvious in his case. But what'd be funny is if somebody took that old joke that isn't actually true about Power Girl, right? And used that where as the plot got tenser over time, also like one of the lead female protagonist's breasts slowly got bigger. So as the plot thickened, so did her chest. That would be funny. Somebody should put that in a comic or something.
The plot thickens in more ways than one.
Or it could even be something that bounces back, right? Maybe she's like, it could be a detective comic, right? And his like sidekick is a hot chick, maybe like a ditz or something. Or actually, you could even make her more intelligent and get pissed off about this. But like it turns out, as the plot of the episode thickened, so did she. And then it would like be back to normal after the mystery gets solved, and she's like, "Thank God." That would be hilarious. I don't know if you'd have to have obviously more than that for a story to go, more than a single issue. But for a one shot, that would be funny, and then you could probably come up with more things to actually drive it. There's a joke in one of my scripts where one of the female characters gets her boobs torn off. Is that good enough? No. It's the exact opposite of what I want to happen. Anyway. So what I was saying, when it comes to tanks, what would be really cool in that type of game is for them to use like the Sekiro type mechanics, but make it a party type game similar to like Dragon's Dogma, right? Where maybe you have like one or two other people that are following you around. I think that could actually not only make tanks more viable, but give them creative freedom for making tanks interesting while balancing around them, right? Because I think one of the big problems is the overall combat style in those games. And they, as creators, probably just don't find it interesting to work in that. Like, they probably can't think of creative things to do. You can say that's a skill issue. Sure, whatever. There's another topic we're going to be talking about shortly that I also think is a developer skill issue. But I think in a game that has the Sekiro type pacing, and you also had like a fixed, at least 2 NPCs with you, you could make very fun and creative things where if you want the main character, the one you play as, to be that type of tank class, that you could go to town working on that. And that's a type of game they should highly consider making.
Too bad their servers were garbage, because Karok and Vindictus was a fun tank.
Yeah. I know you enjoyed him for the brief time that we were even able to do that. Still running, too. Hey, you want a single-player game?
Using heavily quotes on running there.
Yeah. What was say? You want a single-player game that might even give you a playstyle like that might work in single-player, just because of how they managed to think about their characters. There's the Vindictus. I think it's a sequel, which is weird. It's one of those weird prequel sequels, since Vindictus is a ancient prequel to Mabinogi. But there's a Vindictus single-player game that is on the horizon. So maybe they'll give you a Karok-like character you could play in that game. Or the ability to make your character like that. It might be a custom character for all I know.
If so, nice.
Oh, hey, Kirby. But yeah. Now, I don't know if some of the best parts of Karok will be viable in all situations, like the grappling and stuff, because that's obviously was more viable when you had teammates, right? But hey,
well,
you
the
might
boss
get
grappling
fists.
Anyway.
Yeah, I guess you could always toss the smaller people around, but the pillar, or even give you like a fist weapon, might still just be an option that they throw in there. That could be fun.
Still waiting for Monster Hunter to give us a fist weapon.
Yeah, you're gonna be waiting forever on that.
I know, but it's like, can you really introduce a character like the Admiral and tell me that there aren't people who just punch monsters for a living?
Yeah. It's just what they are. It's just how Capcom makes that game particularly. I think I've exhausted the FromSoft topic. Unless you had anything else to say on that.
Not that I can think of. Only real news about that I've seen is just how torn people are on the price point for the DLC.
Yeah. But I think
Which
you were
is
saying too,
just...
it's basically almost a full game.
Yeah, because it's... Basically, it uses the same maps and everything, but it's got enough content in it that a lot of people said that if it wasn't the same maps, could have been a sequel, so... Like, $40 for a DLC, if that's the case, doesn't seem that bad, but at the same time, also a time when people are raising prices for next to no reason, so there's also the worry of, okay, well, somebody who made a DLC that was worth $40 made a $40 DLC now. Let's see if people who make a DLC that isn't worth $40 decide to try and use it as an excuse.
You could talk about Dr. Disrespect. That's gaming, right? I don't really want to talk about it. To be honest. There's a couple times that we've talked about things that you might call in the drama category on here, but I usually prefer to avoid it. Mostly because I don't personally find it that entertaining to talk about. Never
Especially when
really
it's
have.
something he himself admitted, so it should have been just over and done with already.
That and while I don't have any particular dislike for him either, uh, maybe I would if I dug more into the situation. I don't know. I don't have never had any particular like for him. I was always completely, I wouldn't even say neutral, disconnected from Dr. Disrespect. And the less I know about him, honestly, the happier my life is.
I completely forgot Dr. Disrespect was even a thing until this crap popped up.
Yeah, same. He's like one of those guys that I would tangentially just see doing things here and there. Like, oh, there's I think he got banned at one point, but before that, like, oh, there's a major Twitch competition with a bunch of different creators and he's on it or whatever. Like, I would see his name and him pop up, and that's it. That would be the most I'd ever have a connection to seeing that guy.
Yeah, and I'd just be seeing him pop up, and it's like, okay, now let me watch a video from somebody I actually bother to watch.
What about the Captain Delusion drama? I don't even know what that is. Yeah. So, here's somebody that I would prefer to rag on. I like ragging on people who are in the industry, right? If the drama is industry related, that's cool. We could talk about that. Mostly because it affects people on the entertainment and wallet level, right? I'm gonna tell you a take that I find is really stupid, that some people might think is actually a good take, because of how he's framing it. But as somebody who's been playing video games for a very long time, actually, I think I was playing video games before I could walk. Poorly, badly. It's not like I was winning anything. I was probably dying over and over in level 1, but I was still holding a controller in my hand and attempting to play video games around that time. No, I'm not trying to use it to brag. Like, I was definitely dying over and over again, and what I assume is either Mario 3 or Bugs Bunny's 50th anniversary, or Big Birthday Blowout. It had 2 different names. I can't remember which one was first. But I've had a lot of experience with video games. I've played a lot of different types of games. I like a lot of different types of games. And to me, I think a game is strongest when the creator of the game has a strong vision in mind, like a captain sailing a ship en route, right? And all the hands are working on that vision, and every part of the game works in tandem with that vision, where you have a turn-based RPG where you play as elementary schoolers. Actually, yeah, you answered that question perfectly. It's the Mother franchise, which is a good example of what I'm saying, where every single part of the game works in tandem to fulfilling that vision. From the mechanics of the game, the storytelling, the character designs, the music, just every part of the game is like a symphony being orchestrated. And these days, I find there's a lot of very weak games that use shortcuts to getting people to want to play them, right? Cheat codes almost in game design, where the game isn't actually that good, but it has a thing that draws people to it, right? One of the things that I've complained about for a long time is most games don't need creative characters. And if I see a game with a creative character, I'm really going to have to look into why creating your character was necessary for the game, right? So, like, a game like The Sims makes sense. An MMO makes sense, too, so that everybody running around in the world doesn't look exactly the same, right? There's a lot of games where it makes perfect sense to have a creative character. But then you look at a game where a creative character was completely unnecessary whatsoever, and if they just gave you a strong, well-written protagonist, the story they could have told in the game might have been stronger. And create a character is like one of those red flags for me. Create a character does make sense for a game like Fallout or like, say, Elder Scrolls or whatever. That is one where it does make sense. That's why I said I have to dive in when I see a character.
I'd like to make a slight addendum to that, though.
Which one?
The create a character no longer made a sense in Fallout 4.
I haven't played 4, so I'll have to take your word on that, yeah.
Is in 4 you have two actual very set characters in terms of voice, background, overall nature. Like, you even just get the background of, oh, well, one of you was a lawyer and the other one was in the army. That's why you have your skills. It's like, you have a character that is so hard set in who they actually are that making them create a character does not really make any sense at all.
I think the only argument that I would make on that part, because Fizchoso also says, yeah, Fallout 4 made you play a completely pre-made. It doesn't make sense for Elder Scrolls anymore either. In both those cases, while a create a character doesn't make sense with how some of the dynamics of the game, at the very least, they should just give you a male or female version of the character to play as. Because there are slight changes between playing as a guy or a girl. But that's about it, right? If it's close to how Skyrim was, Skyrim with the Dovahkiin, literally, it didn't matter what race or anything. If it was just male or female is the only difference. But create a character is a red flag for me, right? Because of stuff like that. Where I love Mass Effect. Mass Effect also could have just been pick male or female, because it did change some of the relationship dynamics depending on which one. But Shepard was still Shepard no matter what. There was really no reason to let you modify her or his face, which I'm going to say in that order because obviously FemShep is the canon Shep. But there's no reason to turn Shepard into a creative character. It didn't bring the game down, though, because you were still Shepard no matter what. But it was also just like, if I saw that in another game and I didn't know any better, that would be a turnoff for me. Just because I know that companies use these as almost cheat codes to try to draw people in. There's a lot of things that are like that. And a lot of that is about the charade of customizing the user experience. Because people think that they'll enjoy a game more if they get to customize the user experience. But then again, somebody like you might get baited in because you try to customize your experience and then you find out this game doesn't really work well if you want to play as a tank. Right? And there's a lot of cases like that. Baldur's Gate 3 character creation definitely made sense, yes, but that's also because it's basically D&D.
Yeah.
But I think customizing the user experience is not necessary unless it is a game where everything is built around that, right? Like, Sims, obviously, everything about that, everything in Sims is custom. You're building a custom world. You're basically playing God in that one. That's a good example. Obviously, a D&D or a tabletop-based game. If you want something to feel like tabletop customization, even be able to pick different routes. Illusion of choice is definitely one of the issues that you have in like a Telltale game. I agree. There have been games that do a lot better than Telltale at what Telltale tried to do. I've particularly never really been a fan of them. There are a couple games I like, but a couple out of their whole catalog is not a very good ratio.
If you want a perfect example of how Telltale eventually just reached the point where they obviously did not care about your choices and just made the game go a certain way, just look at their Batman game. They literally just sat there and had it to where you have the option to save Harvey Dent from the very event that turns him into Two-Face, only for the next part of the story to turn him into Two-Face anyway.
Yeah. That's Telltale for you. Or like how saving Scooter was impossible because they were already told that Scooter needs to be dead for the next game.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, why can't you have, like, you could list an achievement, reaching the canon ending. Why can't you let things go different directions, right? So all this to say, I don't think customizing the user experience, outside of maybe settings, right? There could be certain things like, I don't know, you've color blindness, right? Or epilepsy or something, and I need to actually change physical settings of, like, I don't want this game to give me a seizure or something like that. That's fine. That level of customization, you could say, should belong in most games in general. But, like, how the game plays, I think often can take away from the vision of the game if it doesn't fit it. There's a big preamble, almost a stall, but it was a setup for this. Christoph Hartmann, do you know who that is?
If I did, I have not remembered.
Okay, he is currently the president of Amazon Games. He is also a founder of 2K Games in the past, and worked on the early GTA games. Now,
So from what I'm hearing is that he's worked for 3 different companies who excel in ripping you off.
well, I believe when he founded 2K Games and worked on the early GTA games, that was the same company. Because 2K is a publisher. But yeah. Or it was before it became 2K, but it basically all the same company. They're under the same company now. So this would be the second, like, actual change that he's made is going to Amazon, or the first change. But yeah. Not to detract what you're saying. I'm just trying to be more specific about it, because you are right. A lot of these, since he's worked at these places, they've gone from giving you good games to ripping you off. He was interviewed and pressed with the hot button issue in Variety of all magazines about AI in gaming. And he is not a fan of pirate software. Are you talking about the channel? I'll let him expand on that. But yeah, he was questioned about AI, and he seems to be pretty pro AI in games, which I always think is a very weird decision. AI has always been in games. In fact, game development has done more for the progress of AI than, like, anything else. Mostly because other things need to run in the world, right? Will you have adaptive AI, which I think is a better way of calling what they're trying to add in future games, where, like, NPCs might change what they say based on your interactions? Sure. I mean, we've already seen that in some of what's it called? Oh, there was, like, a visual novel, right? Sort of, but a detective story that Square put out. It was one of their oldest ones, but they brought it back with adaptive AI interface, so that it allows the story to change with you, right? Or AI Dungeon's actually pretty cool too. I don't know if you ever played AI Dungeon, but it basically lets you go in, and the AI is the dungeon master, and you could just do, like, a MUD style, like, text interface where you go through a whole campaign where the AI just keeps adapting to you. AI is what allows enemies to move. Yes, video games have been using AI in different forms much longer than many of the rest of the industries have. But obviously they're talking about bringing in newer forms of AI to it. And he's talking about how this will be a benefit to newcomers, because some games can be overwhelming to newcomers. Which I think is probably the dumbest thing you can say. Adaptive AI, yeah, makes sense for a visual novel RPG. Exactly. Which is why you should go play AI Dungeon if you haven't. It's a great game. Or I guess a great engine. It's not really a game, right? But yeah. And I was reading through this, and I was trying to, like, glimpse what he actually meant by it being... AI could make things more approachable for newcomers to gaming. And some of the stuff, it's like, okay, he was harping on everything is about customization in the world, and we really want to put the gamer in the center and make games where you can customize the game in every way and where it feels very personal. And I don't know. That, to me, that doesn't sound like it's going to make a good game. All it says to me is it's going to make a mediocre experience. If you want to make an engine where the AI customizes everything to you and it's like a Second Life type thing, you'll have an okay time, maybe. Right? You'll never get bored in it, but I don't think you'll be explicitly thrilled either. And that just, I don't know. To me, it already sounds boring. I'd rather somebody with a vision just wow me. But talk about like how it will constantly change the story on you and everything. But more immediate, because that would take a very sophisticated engine to do. This was how he was saying it would help newcomers. And it was that, imagine somebody comes to the game and they're struggling to pick something up. And you could develop AI bots to actually show people the ropes and how to play the game. And the more he goes on about this, the more I start thinking, like, if your game is that unapproachable to a newcomer, that is not a problem with games, or even the person being a newcomer. That's a problem with you as a developer. And you can't use a cheat code like AI to really fix that.
Yeah, if you need to literally design an entire AI-controlled character to essentially do something for them to show them how to do it, yeah, that is 100% just... You have made your game so unapproachable that even a basic tutorial isn't able to do the job.
Yeah, and I don't even think games should need tutorials if you make them right. Maybe with some exceptions. I guess maybe if a game is entirely complex menus, right? Like, I don't know, Artemis or something. Something like you're an actual ship simulator, right? That I could understand needing some tutorials to actually fly a ship if the simulator is supposed to function with all the controls of a ship. Something complex like that. But I think like most games, you should be able to figure out how things go just by like moving around and mashing buttons. Maybe you could have a pop-up tutorial here and there if there is something specifically complicated. Like, I don't know, 30 minutes into a game when you introduce a synthesis mini game. And it's like, you have to do this mini game every single time you want to synthesize. You can have a brief tutorial on that, because that might even be mostly menuing, right? With like some type of reaction system. But if you have to have like complex tutorials, you probably did not make a good game. As a general rule of thumb. Good Night Spoon says, I think I hate AI. I don't think I hate AI. I think I hate the people who want to use AI as a shortcut. Like, I hate the people who want to use AI in general, because most of them just want to use it as a shortcut. How do you feel about that?
No, I feel about the same, because there's a lot of things that could actually be very useful done with AI. Like, there is a murder mystery game that is currently in development that pretty much everything regarding the entire city that this game takes place in is randomly generated by AI, to the point that you don't even have the same crimes every time.
Yeah.
Because the AI decides every time the AI decides, okay, which character decides to commit the murder, how do they decide to commit the murder, who do they murder, and as a result, every single case is going to be entirely different.
Expanded version of Clue, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And that is a good way to use AI.
Yeah, I think that's like the perfect place to use it is if you need a dungeon master. Like I was talking about, while I didn't have any real interest in playing something like, say, Phasmophobia. The fact that they're making a game that functions as a dungeon master for what is emulating otherwise a tabletop experience, just with ghosts, right? I think that's cool. Like that's a cool game for people like that. If people want to like dive into using AI as a dungeon master, which is partially what it feels like he's saying in the earlier half of that interview about customize the experience, there are cool things you can do with that. I still think you need to have a solid vision. Just letting the AI whip up anything for you at any time, I think will probably only ever lead to a mediocre experience. Can still be enjoyable, but probably mediocre. But if you incorporate it into a vision, yeah, you can emulate things that you only get from tabletop because a person can never manipulate an engine in real time the way that an adaptive AI within the engine can. Then, yeah, sure. Go ahead. I don't know if it's the same game or not. Goodnight Spoo says there's that AI neighbor killing game. I don't know if that's the one you were talking about or if there happen to be two of these things that are similar. But that'd be great. You can make some D&D games that are like that, but I still think you need a solid vision, right? You build a world, just like teaching a dungeon master the first time. You give them like an out-of-the-box set, right? The whole world, the Forgotten Realms, is already built. Even the base of the campaign might even be built for that, and they give you more. But once you have the sandbox to play in, it's a lot easier to make fun and focused stories and things like that. Let's see. Goodnight Spoon says, I heard today, and I have suspected for a while, that AI and crypto are responsible for increasing our coal usage 10 to 15-fold. They might be partially responsible. I think just general trends are responsible for that too. Though they do take a lot of computing, which takes a lot of energy, which is why I'm not going to say they're not partially responsible. The big focus on renewables over nuclear is also responsible because a lot of these renewables aren't quite doing the job and people are having to resort to coal to make up for it instead of the other things we have been doing. And poor countries tend to be some of the biggest coal burners. And if I was in a poor country and I had access to computers and knew the turnover rate was so good, I'd probably be farming crypto as well. Industrialization is usually what moves people out of using coal. But yeah, we need a bigger focus on nuclear. Not that I want to get into a energy tangent too much, but I don't know, this guy right here, who has been a part of some good games. I mean, the early GTA. I like the early GTA games. I don't know about you. I think they're fun.
I didn't actually get in. I didn't play a GTA game until Vice City, so.
Vice City's still my favorite.
Vice City, San Andreas, I liked both of them. GTA 4 bored me to tears. In GTA 5, I only have the online for.
You don't want to go bowling with your cousin?
I swear to God, I wish I could shoot him myself. There are so many things that I just tried to do in that town, trying to have any fun whatsoever, and then I just get that stupid phone call.
Goodnight Spoon says Shadow of the Doubt was the one you were talking about. Or Shadows of Doubt.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I've seen it a couple of times, but I didn't remember what the heck the name was.
Yeah. But so I think this guy's been a part of some good games early on. I just... everything he's saying in this interview is just like red flag after red flag. And maybe if it was just one thing, but like all this stuff in conjunction, I think would just make a horrible game. Like a game that wouldn't even be fun to play. It would be like Roblox, right? Maybe with more realistic characters, because that's what everybody want to do. It'd be like Roblox, but without any of the good stuff in Roblox, right? It's just like This AI is going to make the game that you're playing today based on your preferences. And even most things in Roblox, I've watched people play it. Sucks. Occasionally, you get like a good designer who happens to do something interesting in the system, and that just seems like the type of thing this guy wants to go forward. And understand those games are massively popular. They make a lot of money, but the stuff that draws people to it is the more focused things, and I'm not sure if you'll ever get that. And partially, it's because I don't think AI will ever be able to break the rules. Right. To explain what I mean there, it's like art, right? Where the art that wows you the most is not always the thing that is technically the best. Like, it's not the most realistic, photorealistic piece of art, but it's made by somebody who knows the rules well enough that he knows where to break them. And it's like, light wouldn't work that way, but the way this piece is lit makes it more awe-inspiring than if it was in real life.
Yet another reason why I've kept complaining about how the games aren't stylized as much these days.
Oh, dude, I prefer stylized games so much. There's very few games I think would benefit from being ultra-realistic. Maybe you can make a Sims-like game that uses metahuman, and that could be okay, depending on what else you do in the game. Like, obviously, style alone is not going to sell it, but even then, if I could play a functioning version of The Sims, I probably would still pick the stylized Sims over it.
Like, I'm sorry, but you give me a game with, like, the art style and stylization of Breath of the Wild versus a game that does the exact same thing, but it is, like, using up extra, like, data and shit to just look hyper realistic and add nothing else. I'm going to play Breath of the Wild because it looks better.
Yeah. And also, Breath of the Wild has shield surfing, so that's all you need to sell that game. That one downhill slope at what's the name of that mountain? The really big one, right, where the lodge is there, and you could just teleport. There's a shrine nearby, and you just go straight to that mountain, and you could go down the big.
I remember which mountain you're talking about. I just don't remember. I think it was one of the ones that, yeah. I can't remember because it was named after something from one of the Zelda games I didn't play.
Yeah, I just can't remember. Was it Tebra Mountain?
It's something like that, I
think.
think.
I know Lanayru was all the way on the other side in the province. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but it doesn't really matter. Ultra-realistic horror game would make sense. It still depends on what you do in the game, but yeah, I do think the horror genre is the one where photorealism works the best in it. But
the Uncanny Valley feel helped a lot.
Yeah. You can't be too realistic. You have to actually play into that Uncanny Valley, is what I was going to say. I completely agree. But then again, I don't think you can have an in-between, because I don't think the modern Resident Evil games really look good. Even some of the stuff they try to do, they've had to re-stylize them more because people complained about the promotional art. I actually kind of prefer the older ones, which is why I like games like Crow Country that looks like an old Resident Evil or Silent Hill game, right? So I either want something that is really stylized, or, like, if you could get the gore and stuff ultra realistic, it could help a horror game. I don't know if we're there yet, but in theory, it could. It depends what you do with the game. And Good Night Spoon says, I feel the same way about movies. I do too. Even live action stuff. Some of the best movies fudge the lighting because it just makes the shot better. I don't want Christopher Nolan's going to hell. Yeah, I don't want my cinematography and my lighting to look ultra realistic and I can't tell what's going on. I want the thing I'm looking at to be dynamic. Even if, like, it's a room where the like a interrogation, and you know how, like, in interrogation they have, like, the spotlight, right? I think it might be cool that instead of having the light focus on top, just to give, like, the tension, you light it from the bottom, right? And that's not where the light source is realistically coming from, but it makes the scene look nicer. It actually
Oh yeah,
adds to the immersion.
definitely.
It could help a fantasy game if you make a monster look complete. Maybe. Honestly, I think the most realistic I ever want a fantasy game to look, though I would prefer more saturated colors, is probably Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. It doesn't have to be Eastern style. Like you can make it like rounder and stuff to make it look more Western. But I think that's like the highest level realism I ever want from a fantasy game. Personally, I'm not going to fault somebody else who wants a fantasy game to look more realistic just because of they can make the monsters look realistic, but I don't want anything more realistic than Advent Children. And a couple of the Final Fantasy games have gotten close. Like if you took 15 and it wasn't Final Fantasy 15, like it wasn't supposed to be a 15 game, a Final Fantasy game. If you took that style and you up the saturation, you make some of the other stuff more dynamic. I actually like the way that game looks. I think that'd be a fine style for a fantasy game. But I still want it stylized, you know? But that to be said, I think for a while we should probably ignore Amazon games. Not that we haven't been already, because a lot of the MMOs they've decided to localize have been awful, and they've gone like all in on that. They've also made some pretty stupid decisions like that Gollum game, so this is just even more reason to ignore Amazon games.
I forgot. Were they the same? Did they also do that like King Kong game, or was that just an equally bad thing?
Don't remember if that was Amazon. I can look up. That game looked awful though. And the thing is, like, I'm not even blaming them for trying to stylize, because that game was obviously trying to stylize. It was just, it looked awful. Everything about it looked awful. You can also have awful stylization. Like, that's a thing. Was it Skull Island Rise of Kong, or was that the
I
name
think
of it?
so.
Okay, let me see who made this. Developer, Iguana Bee. Publisher was Game Mill Entertainment.
Okay, so that was just coincidentally just as bad thing.
Yeah. But yeah, that was again, I don't fault them. I actually do think it was a better decision to try to make it stylistic. They just made some bad decisions with the style. Mostly Kong's face, and also how it got executed in the game while you're playing it. Because none of the models look good in motion. Yeah, people don't... Good Night Spoon says, people don't still play Silent Hill 2 because of its amazing graphics and realism. People play because there's room for imagination to create more than what graphics ever could. I completely agree. I've actually made this argument in defense of random encounters and how older RPGs work. Because I think, especially when you're in an overworld, like say Final Fantasy, where the map is supposed to be a parallel Earth. So you have to assume that the map is the size of the Earth, and the distances between places are proportional. These people are spending weeks to months on end traveling between places. The cities just look so large because that happens to be the square that they're in, right? They're not actually as large as a square. But say a game like Final Fantasy VI, to be the size of the Earth, every single square that you walk in has to be 100 miles in each direction, right? But because they're making these long journeys, a random encounter lets you fill in, how did we run into this monster, right? Like, were we camping? Did they attack us in the middle of camping or anything like that? And also, turn-based systems too. You don't necessarily have to go with a turn-based system either, but like they let you fill in like how your character did something in the way that a tabletop did. That's why specifically Pokemon I think is better with random encounters. And I don't think people have been learning this. The audience is complaining about stuff, and I don't know if they know what they're actually complaining about. Not having random encounters is part of one of the things that made Sword and Shield bad. Especially because, like, you could just avoid the Pokemon. right? And if you already caught it, there were a lot of people who ended up under level because they were just avoiding fights because they made it easy to avoid. Scarlet and Violet also didn't have random encounters, though sometimes it felt like it did, especially if a Pokemon was very tiny and didn't load into the map and you stubbed your toe on it and were in a battle. I actually kind of like that. But let's talk about immersion, more importantly. If you're in a cave and there's an Onyx that attacks you, it's reasonable, right? It's a dark cave. The thing's made of rocks. Maybe you might see a shadow moving, but if you can't really tell, it makes sense that this giant thing can sneak up on you. Without random encounters, that Onyx is never sneaking up on you, ever. Because for the style, it's colored different than the surrounding of the rocks. It's big, it's obvious, and you know it's there. You can just choose to avoid it. There's no immersion to seeing this Onyx there. I think that's... We have to think, again, going back to this being a symphony. What are all the pieces that kind of fill in together to make this symphony right? Where's your woodwinds? Where's your percussion? Where's your brass? Where's your strings? Silent Hill's great because it fills in the imagination. The mechanics of the game also add to the tension because I hate the term tank controls, but that's what people use for it now. You have to stop and turn to shoot, which means you actually have to plan on when you're going to shoot. Like, there's all these different pieces. The resource management, so you could always shoot something, but you don't know how many shots it's going to take it down. If you even can take it down, is it going to be worth shooting it? Do you need to conserve your ammo? All of these different pieces add to the tension of the Silent Hill game. And I think for a lot of different games, not every game benefits from leaving things to the imagination. Like, say, a fighting game. A fighting game obviously doesn't benefit from leaving things to the imagination. You need to be able to see exactly what's happening precisely all the time. And also, the showier it is, the more attractive it becomes to normies, right? I'm not a big fan of supers, especially because it's like once somebody pulls it off, you might as well put your controller down until it's done. But people who don't really play fighting games kind of tend to enjoy them for the brief time that they play them more if there's like this fancy super that they manage to pull off, right? But a lot of games do benefit from that theater of the mind filling things in. So yeah, just think about the game you're making. I think that's the ultimate lesson I'm trying to drive in. Just think about the game you're making. Have a vision. You have anything to add to that?
Not too much, I don't think.
Okay, what else do we have? Oh, so this is fun. This is a fun thing. Kodak gets Super Mario 64 running on a Game Boy Advance, right? So, now you know that we can kind of just port any 64 game to a PC, right? Like, we just have the ability.
Yep.
You could just take the ROM, you can turn it into an EXE instead of having an emulator that is trying to emulate the hardware. Like, it's using your system and your software and all that to try to, like, do what the hardware, the original system was doing. That's why we call them emulators. You could just run it off of your computer hardware directly now. It's really cool. But because of that, people are trying to see, hey, what else can we get these things to run on? And we know that Doom can run on basically anything. So, what can Super Mario 64 run? Well, a guy, a programmer, Joshua Barreto, actually made a build of Mario. It's very crunchy. It is very far from the smoothest experience that you'll ever see. But it is cool that he got it running on a Game Boy Advance. And it even has the real 3D. Instead of a fixed like 2.5D perspective tricks like Doom or anything. Like, it actually finds a way to give you that experience of running Mario in 3D. The Game Boy Advance could do this, actually, in weird ways, because it did that with Mario Kart Super Circuit. as opposed to the other Mario Kart for the Super Mario Kart for the SNES that kind of used the I think it's called Mode 7 or whatever to kind of project the map. Mario Kart Super Circuit was actually going through the track or pulling the track through you. So it uses a lot of the same stuff that the engine of the Game Boy Advance has available to make it feel like you're running through 3D in Mario. Interacting with the objects, you're able to actually change levels and stuff. It's cool. I don't know how anybody would get it. I'm sure maybe there's a ROM version you can find somewhere. Possibly. And if you have that, I'm sure you could also probably find a modded Game Boy Advance cartridge that could let you put a micro SD card in there and run any Game Boy Advance game you want on there. Not saying these things do or don't exist, but you could probably find them. You could at least find a video on it. You could just type in Super Mario 64 on the GBA. Doesn't look like it's finished yet. It's still in update, but I'm sure he'll probably leak a ROM around somewhere when it's done. But I kind of want to play it just because of how goofy it sounds.
It does sound like one of those things that are so crazy you want to try it.
Yeah. Like, wasn't there another game that did that? Banjo Pilot, wasn't that a GBA game? I swear there was like a banjo racing game that was on the Game Boy Advance.
Oh, yeah, I think that Banjo Pilot, yeah, I think
And that
so.
one actually changed levels as well. I think it used the same, part of the Game Boy Advance to do that. Whatever in the hardware lets them do that. I don't really know the ins and outs of the Game Boy Advance. I know everything in that was still made in assembly. So you had to everything was restricted by what the motherboard could and couldn't do. And you could kind of make up for that with what you put in the cartridge, but not by too much.
Okay, yeah, Banjo Pilot was for the Game Boy Advance.
I thought so. I remembered seeing it. I never played it, but I remember seeing it in, like, Nintendo Power. Was there another game? Like, there was a Gruntilda's Revenge or something was also on the Game Boy Advance? I think so. Let me look at this.
Yeah,
Where Grunty's Revenge.
yeah, I think it was Grunty's Revenge, and it was a top-down kind of adventure game.
Yeah, it was. Kind of like isometric.
Yep.
Sort of. That one also kind of used 3D in some parts of it, though. Like, that game is wild when you think about the fact that that was on a Game Boy Advance. Of course, we also forget that the Game Boy Advance is basically just a portable SNES. As far as, like, how powerful it was.
Yeah.
1v1 me in Smash 64 GeoGuessr Scrubs. I don't know who you're talking to when it comes to that, but I'm not bad at Smash 64. There's L canceling in Smash 64, but people didn't find out about that until they figured out what it was in Melee, and then they went back to see if some of that stuff worked in 64 as well.
Oh, well, that's something I didn't know.
Yeah. There's actually quite a few different things. Like, I don't think wave dashing works in it, but there's some crazy things you can do with L canceling. And there's some things about 64 that nobody ever bothered to see if it was a thing until they're like, well, this thing was in Melee. Let's see if it was in the previous game.
Also, in trying to find out, looking up Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge real quick, I found something called Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge Redone, in which someone started to reimagine it as an actual N64 game.
Oh, like tearing Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie apart to remake the
game. To remake Banjo or Grunty's Revenge as a 3D Banjo-Kazooie / Tooie style game.
Yeah. See, Fizchozo asks, what was the best Zelda game on the Game Boy Advance? My biased opinion is going to be Link to the Past Advance that also had Four Swords Adventure in it. But that's also because A Link to the Past is just my favorite Zelda game. And aside from A Link Between Worlds, which is basically just a remake of A Link to the Past with a different story in it, I don't think they've yet to outdo A Link to the Past. But if you would like a less biased opinion of, okay, we'll throw out A Link to the Past because that was a game that already existed, and Four Swords isn't long enough to hold it out on its own, right? So we'll just throw that out. Of the games made on the Game Boy Advance, I mean, the only answer is Minish Cap, which is a great game. So it would be The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap. Which was developed by Capcom, mostly. Oddly enough. Anyway, we only have a few minutes left, so I guess we'll go through the last thing that I had pulled up. Tell them it's Phantom Hourglass. Phantom Hourglass isn't on the Game Boy Advance, it's on the DS. Which, there was a lot more new Zelda games on the DS than there were on Game Boy Advance. There's also, like, Spirit Tracks is on there as well. What is it called? Tingle's Wonderful Rosy Rupe Land or whatever? I can't remember the exact name. It's some extravagant, some long name. It's technically a Zelda game. It's on the DS. People try to forget about it. I'm actually having to look up the name of this because I always forget it. It's got a fun name. It's Freshly Picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land. That was the name of it. Best Castlevania on the GBA. That would be Aria of Sorrow, which also is the first appearance of my favorite Castlevania character, and one of the best ones in the whole franchise to not be at Belmont, Soma Cruz. He was highly underrated. I think the DS one, Dawn of Sorrow, which is like a sequel to Aria, is a better game, but only because of the things they added and how they did the story. It's longer. Aria of Sorrow is a very solid experience that is more replayable than Dawn's, especially with it being slightly shorter. Mario 64 isn't on the Game Boy Advance, and yet it is. I will await you being wrong as long as I have to. Well, I'm sure it might be on Game Boy Advance someday if somebody decides to try to reverse engineer Phantom Hourglass to it, but right now it's not. That is a correct statement. Hey, Mike. Yeah, no marsupial tonight. But the last thing I was going to talk about before we head off, because we only have a couple minutes, Steam summer sales are kicking off, and one of the biggest things is they are doing a 90% discount, what they call deep discounts, on 22 all-time greats. Which I don't think I have the actual full list in front of me. I was trying to find it. Here we go. Features deep discount page. So I'm going to have the whole thing in front of us. There are special deals. All of these things are 90% off. So if these are games that you have been wanting to get into and just never have, now might be the time to pick it up. So we have Prison Architect, Jurassic World Evolution 2, which I don't know why anybody wants to get into that one. Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint, which is actually not a bad game. It's one of the few more recent Ubisoft games that were pretty good. Borderlands 2, $3. Man, if I didn't already own... Well, I mean, it's only $20 normally. But if I didn't already own Borderlands 2, $3 would be a steal. Because that's like an actual good Borderlands game. Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, Wildlands. I don't know if that one's even worth $5. American Truck Simulator for $1.99. Frostpunk, Humankind. Castle Crashers is $1.49 right now. That's a great. I love Castle Crashers. I might actually go back through and play through that again because I have a copy. Disco Elysium, the final cut, is $4. Arma 3. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is like $4 right now. Euro Truck Simulator 2. Bloons Tower Defense 6. Bloons Tower Defense is like one of the most classic games that people would blow time on in class. Oh, you're supposed to be typing today? No, I'm going to go play Bloons Tower Defense instead. That one's for like $140. Battlefield 5, that's a skip if you ask me. Civ 6, it might be worth it. Shogun 2, Total War. Celeste, it's $2. Arkham Knight, I'd probably pass on that one. I know it's a much better game. They fixed a lot of the stuff now. Still don't care about it. I'd rather just go back and play the original Arkham Asylum. Middle Earth Shadow of War, probably would skip that one too. Battlefield 2042 also would skip. And Assetto Corsa, a racing game. I mean, I've heard that was an okay racing game. But those are all your deep deals. Some of them, if I didn't already own them, I would definitely be picking up. What about you, Buck? Were there anything on that list that you don't have, or if you didn't already own, you would pick up?
I mean, if I didn't already own them, Witcher, Castle Crashers, Borderlands 2 would definitely be pickups for me, but I've already got them.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Some of these games that we actually think are great, we already got them because they're great, so... But hey, if we could recommend them to other people, I wouldn't be down or be against streaming another playthrough of Borderlands 2. It's been a really long time. Might even do it on the Vomitorium if I can get a few people. But, yeah, that's going to be it. Still good deals, I think, overall.
Yeah, I just realized that I can get back into Borderlands 2 multiplayer because the last time I played with some friends, I was having trouble with the online, and I kept getting disconnected. I didn't realize that there is actually a program on my computer that throttles my connection. So I have to disable it when the computer starts up. Otherwise, I can only get 2 megabytes per second.
Oh, that's rough.
So yeah, to anybody out there who has the program called Gamer First on your computer built in, get rid of it.
So here's a funny tangent that is also not true. Marsupial blocked Goodnight Spoon because he called him a scrub, and he thinks that revealed him to be someone from his past. I don't think he blocked you, and B, if he did, it's not the reason he thinks you're someone from his past is not because of the scrub. It was relation to a bet he made with a model. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it for the show. It's 9:33. We've ran our time. Thank you for filling in, Buck. It's been a pleasure, and I personally wasn't even feeling that good today, so I wasn't against canceling it. But because Marsupial had already asked you, and you had answered before I'd said anything, really, it's good that I didn't. We still ran the show anyway. It's good to keep on schedule. So, thank you all for showing up and watching. Whether it is here now, you were in the chat, or if you're watching the replay later, if you enjoy the show, please share it with somebody else. Grow the audience, get more people in here, and if you really want to go one step above and beyond, you can donate to the Soda Fund at streamlabs.com/vomitoriumlive. I will read out almost any message that comes with a donation, and it helps going towards many different things, like replacing my headphones so I don't have to use a pair that is electric taped together. And I will see you guys on Monday, unless you're one of the random people that watches stuff with us on Saturdays in the Vomitorium Discord. But yeah, we'll see you for Super Serial Showtime. Catch you then.
Bye.